For the price, we think it's a no-brainer. We're just seriously impressed. This is the Radeon RX 7600 and it retails for just $269 US. For that, you get a cute nifty little card that will probably fit in any kind of small form factor PC case there is, and it will also be an absolute beast when it comes to 1080p gaming and even 1440p. Seriously, we mean it. Over 60 frames per second in Cyberpunk 2077 and a steady 120 frames per second in Modern Warfare 2, both at 1080p Ultra. Best of all, it runs whisper quiet while gaming and still maintains a temperature of just about 75 degrees Celsius. For the price, we can say it's really a no-brainer. We are just seriously impressed. It's been quite some time since AMD has announced any new graphics card. We covered the Radeon RX 7900 XTX and the XT back when it first launched, and those cards are amazing in their own right. Perhaps more so with the XTX considering the price and the performance. Now sure, everything is getting more and more expensive nowadays and that's a real shame, but compared to the competition, AMD is actually still very much more reasonable. But there are definitely still many of us who can't just throw that amount of money on a single graphics card alone. This is where the Radeon RX 7600 comes in, an entry-level graphics card that certainly hits the sweet spot for many gamers out there. We are talking 1080p and even 1440p gaming, and after putting it through much testing, we are just seriously impressed. And as you probably already know from the title, this card makes the RTX 4060 Ti look extremely stupid. But before we get into the numbers and all that, let's talk a little bit about the card itself, because for our review unit, we did actually get this directly from AMD. So what you see here is the reference design. We are definitely glad to see that AMD has stuck to the same design scheme as with their flagship cards, and it honestly looks really great. If you have seen how the reference RX 7900 XTX or the XT looks like, the RX 7600 is basically a compact version of those. You still get that all-black stealth design with red accents complete with a metal backplate, but because it's just that much smaller of a card, there's just two fans. But it is a proper 2-slot card and you only need 1x8 pin for power. We have it here in our Asus Prime AP201 and it fits in amazingly well. Honestly, we actually really like the reference design of the card, and you might be surprised, but it performs really well as well. But now, let's quickly go through the specs and compare it to what it replaces, the RX 6600. The RX 7600 basically features more compute units and ray accelerators, higher clock speeds, faster memory speeds, second generation Infinity Cache, HDMI 2.1 support, and AV1 hardware encoding. And of course, you get all of that at a much lower launch price of $269 US. With AMD's own internal testing at 1080p Ultra, they claim roughly 29% higher performance as compared to the RX 6600 and 34% faster compared to the RTX 3060. That is a pretty bold claim because the performance difference is sizable and it's even more affordable at that. So it goes without saying that we had to test it for ourselves. For our testing, we are using this PC that we built actually rather recently, so here's the full spec list for those of you who want to take a look at a glance. But the most important thing to take note is that we are using the Ryzen 7 7800X3D that's paired with the ROG Strix LC2 360 AIO, and that should pretty much take care and prevent any kind of bottleneck that will be coming from the CPU side of things. The case itself is well ventilated and we're testing in a room which is kept at a constant 24 degrees Celsius. One disclaimer, however, is that we actually didn't have all that much time to be able to test all our 10 games in our usual benchmark procedures, so we decided to just focus on 5 key game titles, and we're only looking at 1080p and 1440p performance. If you're looking for 4K gaming, well, this is not enough, we'll say it outright. But without further ado, let's dive into the benchmarks. Again, we can only really say one thing. We are seriously impressed. 1080p is still a fantastic resolution, and this is one beast of a graphics card if that's your jam. Again, near 90 frames per second in Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p Ultra, and you can even hit nearly 120 frames per second should you turn on FSR 2.1. Or if you like a little bit more realism by turning on ray tracing, you can do that as well. But of course, go easy on those settings because AMD is still not primarily as invested in ray tracing as of yet. But again, Apex Legends, Modern Warfare 2, they all play great. You can also do 1440p depending on the game, and for really retro indie titles, 4K, yes, still possible. But we would say that this is primarily a 1080p card where you can really enjoy all that high frame rates. So, the performance is already really impressive. But what made it even more impressive was the thermal performance and the acoustics while gaming. With this AMD reference design, we measured just about 75 degrees Celsius during load, and a noise level that we couldn't even measure properly given our noise floor. But we can definitely vouch that as long as there's good airflow, it is pretty much whisper quiet and you barely noticed it, even if your rig is on the desk. So, all bells and whistles, right? Well, that depends. Right now, we only have the reference RX 7600 which features 8GB of RAM. And you might think that 8GB is plenty for 1080p, but if you're someone who plans to max out all your game settings, 8GB is surprisingly not enough even at 1080p. For instance, when we tested Resident Evil 3, we had to lower the shadow quality down from max to high because that one setting alone maxed out our VRAM, causing frequent stutters during gameplay because the memory usage is just spilling over. The same is true for Apex Legends. Spot shadow detail takes up a whole lot of VRAM, and 8GB is just not enough for the insane setting. Though, as we say all that, this probably isn't that huge of a deal as generally we do not recommend running your games at Ultra or the maximum settings in the first place. That really is just diminishing returns going from high to Ultra or even higher. So if you're just talking about 1080p high, you're going to get an extremely enjoyable experience with better frame rates at that. But now let's talk about price and the competition. And this really is the icing on the cake. At $269 US, there's nothing quite like the Radeon RX 7600. At the moment, its supposed direct competitor would be the upcoming RTX 4060 that will go for $299 US, but at this point in time, we can actually already make some great inference given that the RTX 4060 Ti has already launched. If we were to borrow some of the findings of the RTX 4060 Ti that has already been published by the other reviewers, you'll be surprised to know that the RX 7600 offers just about 10% less performance in comparison. For example, in Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p Ultra without FSR or DLSS, which means we're just talking pure rasterization performance, the RTX 4060 Ti achieves roughly 100 frames per second on average, while the RX 7600 achieves 89 frames per second on average. But the RTX 4060 Ti costs $399 US. The RX 7600 costs just $269 US. I don't think we need to really explain much further. If we're talking about the RTX 4060, however, at $299 US, if that performs the same as this, it might still make sense, but the RTX 4060 Ti, forget it. Anyways, what can we say? We are just seriously impressed. If you're upgrading for a GTX 1060, RTX 2060 or 2060 Super, and you want a sizable upgrade without spending a whole lot of money, the RX 7600 is honestly a worthy upgrade, especially for the price. Heck, even if you're just using the last generation RX 6600 which this directly replaces, it is enough of a performance uplift to entice an upgrade. AMD is doing great things, tier for tier. Definitely not something we can say about NVIDIA this generation. Again, we're just really impressed with what this nifty little card is capable of. We highly recommend it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below and be sure to take a look and answer them. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to us for more of such content and follow us on all our other social channels. And we'll catch you in the next one. See ya!